Sorry if I lost everybody there for a minute, but good to see everybody. Hope everybody had a great weekend. And please feel free to chat in questions, observations, anything like that, because always makes our time together more valuable, and it's fun to hear everyone's thoughts and perspectives. So we're going to talk about ego, part 2, and as a kind of a follow-up from our conversation from last week. And when we were talking about ego last week, we were talking about how really our egos are kind of an ancient artifact in a lot of ways, and that thousands of years ago, or at a time when the world was more treacherous around us, more dangerous. Our ego was meant to aid us really more in our physical protection, because we didn't really have a lot of extra time for curiosity and self-image. And so we were really focused more, simply on survival. And so our ego was there to just like literally physically protect us, right? To help with our protection. And part of that was, and we'll talk a little more about this in the coming slides, is that when there was a change in the environment, okay, it triggered our reptilian brain, right? Where when there was a change in the environment, we were focused on scanning for threats. And we've talked about this off and on, for the last year and a half, that when there's a change in the environment, we scan for threats. Now, again, when we were in a more treacherous environment, okay, scanning for threats were like physical threats, right? It could be a predator, it could be some other type of danger. In today's environment, we don't have that. But when we sense a change, right, our ego triggers us, and it still kicks into protection mode, but more about our view of ourselves. So it looks at how do we protect our view of ourselves, okay? Because our view of ourselves, as opposed to being a physical safety, the view of ourselves and how we look at ourselves and our preconceived notions are safety in and of themselves. So, that's what we talked about last week. And so if we can eliminate or reduce, eliminate is probably a stretch because we all have it. I'll share a personal experience with you. But if we can eliminate or reduce the number of moments and times when we feel threatened, okay, then we're really kind of taming the ego, okay? Because the ego becomes the strongest, all right, when we feel threatened. And it kicks in the most when we feel threatened. And again, we don't have a lot of physical threats floating around, but we have other threats, right? Threats to our status quo, our self-image of ourselves, our immediate surroundings. And so let's just talk about, just briefly, like what are ego-based responses today? Like what are the things that are going to trigger ego? Well, certainly a change in your immediate environment. Could be, you got to move your office, or your car breaks down, or something like that, right? Something that triggers a change in your immediate environment. New ideas, and I'll share with you something at the end here that I experienced last week. I was kind of chuckling to myself. But new ideas can trigger ego, because to have a new idea, you have to let go of an old idea, and letting go of an old idea is change. And a lot of times it could be powerful change, and so that can trigger your ego. Changing in relationships, and whether it's personal or business or just at a friendship level, how do changing relationships affect your view of yourself, right? And your view of your status quo. Well, wait a minute, this relationship is changing. It's either expanding, or it's contracting, or it's shifting, right? My best friend just moved from, Maine to California, and, I relied on that person for whatever. And so changing relationships, certainly the disruption of routine. Disruption of routine can really trigger ego. Now, it can trigger it in funny ways. It can make you irritable. It can it can leave you kind of off balance, and so you can have a change of a routine over here, but it might trigger you to do something to try to get more control over here, right? So it shifts. And when you have that type of change around you, and you're trying to control things, your ego will kick in to try to control things. So disruption routines are one to really watch. And I'll just throw this out here as an exercise. Go into your kitchen, and I don't know if you have a blender or a toaster, or if you can move your microwave or any appliance that you have that you use on a regular basis. Obviously, you can't move your stove or refrigerator, but any appliance, or where you keep your silverware, move it around. Move it around every now and then, so that you become the disruptor of your routine, so that you're aware, right? It gives you muscle memory about how to adjust to disruption of routines. I mean, look, like when was the last time we moved the coffee maker or the toaster? So it might sound trite or a little silly, but condition yourself for disruption and routine, right? Because it changes your muscle memory. Challenges to the established view of yourself, that can trigger ego, because as we've talked about, we have a view of ourselves, but when that view changes, right, the ego will kick in to protect or preserve, right, the view of ourselves. And lastly, changes to your established view of institutional concepts. And that could be anything. That could be history, it could be religion, it could be politics, it could be a social group you belong to, it could be anything. But changes to your established view are really powerful, right? Because all of us identify with some type of institutional concepts. And so there's others, of course, but those are some of the ego-based trigger points in today's environment. As we talked about last week, it's not marauding Vikings or a pack of wolves chasing you down, right? It's things that are more a little more benign, and that are environmental. And so we've talked about this before. And so why is that the case, right? And so we're pre-wired. We are pre-wired for fear of loss than we are for potential of gain. And it's all about our ancient survival instincts. Okay, we talk about the ego is directly connected to our survival instincts, and it's ancient. It's an ancient artifact. Now, I'm not advocating that we don't need our ego, right? Because you need it at some level, but we don't need it at the level in which it has, been as a historical artifact. And so we are pre-wired, okay, through countless generations of having to be on guard for fear of loss than potential of gain. And that's actually a condition that's called loss aversion. And again, we've talked about this, I think, a few times, but it's directly connected to ego, okay? Because ego is about self-preservation of, in this day and age, right? Not about, the saber-toothed tiger hunting us down, but preserving our view of things, our view of ourselves, our view of institutions, our view of relationship, whatever the case may be. And so what that says is that loss aversion, I'm just going to paraphrase, is the status quo is better than the unknown, even though the known is not optimal. So loss aversion is okay, I know this, whatever this is, right? What's going on around me, even though it's not optimal, even though that I'd prefer to have something else, I'm going to choose what I know and the known, even though the known is not ideal, to the unknown. And even though the unknown is where all the improvement's going to be, right? It's the unknown where all the opportunity is. There is no opportunity in the known. And so that's what loss aversion is. And so if we kind of understand that about ourselves, if we understand that all of us out of the box, right? When we come here, we are wired for loss than we are for potential of gain. And right, we fear loss more than we covet gain. And so, but we can change that, and it's all within our power to change it. And that's how we control our ego. And I found this quote over the weekend, and it's train yourself in the art of letting go of everything you fear to lose. And that's powerful, and that sounds pretty lofty. But if you're not afraid of losing things, then you're always focused on gain, and you're always focused then on half full, not half empty, because loss aversion that will trigger your ego is all about half empty. Okay. Now, it might manifest itself in a lot of different ways, but it's basically that simple. It's either half full or half empty. If you're half full, you're scanning for opportunities. Okay. If you're half empty, you're living more in fear, which is more likely to trigger your ego. So we're talking about triggers, right? Will most likely trigger your ego, right? But you can change that. You can rewire yourself to be looking for scanning for opportunity versus scanning for threats. And when you're scanning for opportunity, you're out of judgment, you're living in curiosity, and then everything's possible, right? When you're half empty and you're scanning for threats all the time, and you're going to be in judgment more often, and then your field of view narrows significantly. Okay. And so we can literally wire ourselves, rewire ourselves so that we're more focused on what the opportunities are, which is less likely to trigger our egos. And I'll just share the story with you. So I was meeting with Kristen Diamond, who's our chief marketing officer, and Joanne Gogan, who runs Grady's Title, and the three of us were talking about something, and they had this idea, and I don't want to get into the idea yet, not here, but they had this idea about changing something that had been kind of a long-standing way in which we've done things. And when they first brought it to me, we're just talking, it was kind of casual, right? We're just talking about it. And they said, well, what about if we did this? And my immediate reaction, and it was pretty funny, my immediate reaction was, well, no. And I had to stop for a minute. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. Just because we've always done it that way doesn't mean that's the way we should continue to do it. And like immediately I was like, well, wait a minute, let's talk about this some more. And then as we talked about it, here's what was so fascinating. As we were talking about it, the opportunities were unfolding and unfolding and unfolding, right? About, oh, wait a minute, this opens up this door, this opens up that door, this allows us to do this for people and that for people. And all of a sudden it was like, wow, I mean, and I'm just laughing at myself, because my first reaction was like muscle memory. Well, no, we've always done it this way. And what we were talking about is something that actually works pretty well, but it can work better. And that was a form of loss aversion, right? That was a form of something that I designed, works pretty well. And we're talking about replacing it. And it's something that I think even organizationally we've grown comfortable with. But there's things that we could do better. And so it kind of happens to all of us. We kind of catch ourselves. If we can catch ourselves, they're kind of fun moments, because once you know that, once you know that, and once you kind of catch yourself in the act, so to speak, those are powerful moments, because that expands your thinking. It expands the view of yourself. You're giving yourself permission to say, hey, you know what? You should be thinking about this, okay? As opposed to, protecting your position, right? You don't want to be like this. You want to be expansive. So anyway, so it was kind of a fun, fun moment for me. Kristen and Joanne and I haven't talked about it. I'm sure they picked up on it, because I certainly did. For me, it was like muscle memory. I was like, oh yeah, I got to catalog that. So how do you tame the beast, right? And the beast is the ego. And I'm gonna say the ego is really not our friend. We have it, and it's part of us, so we can't ignore it. But I'm gonna say it's really not our friend, because think about conflicts, arguments, family feuds, relationship feuds, international politics. You think about all these things; they're all ego-based, and ego-based is anything that's ego-based is more often than not fear-based. All right. And so you can tame the beast by not letting it engage. If it doesn't engage, okay, it can't be in charge, and a lot of times the ego's in charge. So you don't let it engage by substituting your latent fear of loss when change occurs with that of curiosity for what you're going to gain. So you're going to want to substitute. Once you go into fear, you go into self-protection, and your ego kicks in. And what happens. You start making excuses, you start defending. Defending is a big one. Defending why something is this way, right? All those types of things. And so you want to substitute your latent fear of loss in exchange, and it's a literal exchange. Okay. It's like exchanging, money for goods. Okay. I'm going to exchange my latent fear of the unknown, of change, okay, with that of curiosity, and what can I gain? And once you switch from fear to curiosity, right, then the ego's turned off, and then the threats, right, and then the natural threats that trigger egoic behavior are neutralized. And so it's a really powerful thing to understand that. It's kind of one thing to not like something, or have something be kind of an annoyance. And that's made worse if you don't understand it. So if you don't like something and you don't understand it at the same time, that's like the double whammy. Okay. But if you can understand it, okay, even though you might not like it, but if you can understand it, then you can start to work with it and make it what you want. And I think kind of the ego's that way, really, where it served a purpose. It's an artifact. We don't need it nearly as much today as we have, but we're still wired that way. And it's kind of fun to be able to change your own wiring. So let's just see what we got here for chat. So we got a couple in here. We got one from Allie. Often when you try to make change, others won't like it. Yep, people don't like change. That's that's for sure. Yeah, that's interesting. Use the word seems. Yeah, versus adapt. Yeah, that's interesting. And Edie. Yeah, the unknown is where. The unknown is where all the opportunity is. It's kind of a funny thing. And I was listening to a podcast this morning. This is so fascinating. Just Edie's comment just jogged my memory. So I was listening to this podcast this morning on the way in, and they were talking about cosmology, the study of stars, right? And they're talking about in 1920, okay, so 100 years ago, basically, that the entire universe was considered basically the Milky Way. Now, everybody understand that the calculation is that there's like 7 trillion universes in only 100 years. And so it's pretty interesting, how things change. But if 100 years ago, if someone said, well, there's 7 trillion universes, they'd be like, well, you're crazy. So I just thought changing perspective on things, and allowing perspectives to change, and that's in accepting certain things about change is how you kind of do your own rewiring for that substitution for latent fear versus curiosity of gain. So I don't see any other comments, but these were good. Thank you, Allie. Thank you, Edie. And I hope everybody has a great week. And I hope you have a great Memorial Day. We won't have a session on Monday because of the holiday, but we'll pick it back up the following week. So have a great week and have a great holiday. Take care.